If you're looking to get into the housing market, but you can't find anything affordable in the areas where you want to live, you're not alone. In Australia, the average person doesn't buy their first property until they're 36 years old, which is basically once they're married and have a double income. This is because housing is so unaffordable, especially for single people who don't have the benefit of two incomes. And I don't see the housing crisis improving anytime soon. If anything, it's probably just going to get worse. This is a big issue because getting into the property market so late has a significant impact on people's financial security and their wealth outcomes later in life. The later you start, the harder it becomes to catch up. But the good news is that you don't have to wait until you're nearly 40 years old or until you find a partner to get into the housing market. And you also don't have to sacrifice your lifestyle by buying into an area which you don't like, which is an hour and a half away from your job, your friends, and your family. There's a strategy known as rentvesting, which has become really popular in recent times, and it's proven itself to be a really effective solution to this problem for so many people. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what rentvesting is, and I'm going to walk you through its biggest benefits and also be clear about the downsides too, because it's not a perfect strategy for everyone. And if you're new here, my name's Sam. I'm a qualified lawyer who now works in insurance. I'm a keen property investor and I'm also a rentvestor. And on this channel, I talk about personal finance, investing, and building wealth in a reliable and sensible way over the long term. So if that sounds good, then stick around. Let's start with the basics. What actually is rentvesting? Well, rentvesting is pretty simple. It means you rent where you want to live and you buy property where you can afford to invest. So instead of struggling to buy a home in an unaffordable suburb, you rent in that area, but you buy investment properties in more affordable locations where the numbers make sense. And what I mean by the numbers making sense, I just mean places that have good prospects for strong capital growth and rental returns over the long term. The idea is that by following this strategy for enough years, you'll hopefully have built your wealth to a level where you have an option to do one of two things. Option one is that you can buy a nice home in your desired location. Depending on how well you're doing, you might need to sell off one or more of your investment properties to help fund that purchase. And option two is that you might decide that you actually like renting, and instead of ever buying your own home, you use the passive income from your investment property portfolio to comfortably rent for the rest of your life. So really, rentvesting is about separating your home from your investments. Your home is about lifestyle, and your investments are about building wealth, which is a bit different to the traditional idea that your first property has to be the place you live in. It does mean that you have to think a bit differently and ignore some very common money myths like rent is dead money or you must own your own home at all costs. Neither of those statements are actually true, even though they're repeated all the time. So what are the biggest advantages of rentvesting? Well, rentvesting really does give you the best of both worlds. It allows you to get into the property market and start building your wealth while still living a great lifestyle in the areas where you want to live. So let's break down these two main advantages of rentvesting. First, let's talk about lifestyle. One of the biggest traps people fall into is buying a home they can technically afford, but which is miles away from everything they care about, like their job, their friends, their family, and their hobbies. So that looks like long commutes, less free time, more stress, and a life that basically revolves around working to pay off a house that doesn't actually make you happy. And you have to stop and ask yourself, what's the point of that? Why spend decades grinding to pay off a property that gives you a lifestyle that you don't even enjoy? Rentvesting gives you flexibility. You can live in the type of property you want and in the area that you want, depending on your lifestyle needs at any given point in time. And as I'm sure you know, life can change really quickly. There can be changes around a new job, a new relationship, family, kids, or just shifting priorities. So if you're renting the place where you live, it's much easier to adapt. But if you own your own home, it's a much bigger deal and it's much more difficult to move. It takes a lot more time since the process involves selling your home. And this is also very expensive considering the selling costs, like legal fees and agent fees, and stamp duty and legal fees again on your new place. So most people just can't afford to be moving home all the time, and they can become trapped. So overall, you have a lot more choices and options if you rentvest. You can experiment with different places and different lifestyles without any serious financial consequences because you can easily and inexpensively change your living situation. The second main advantage of rentvesting is faster wealth creation. Rentvesting allows you to grow more wealth at a faster rate than if you go down the home ownership path, and that's for three main reasons. First one is you can get into the market earlier. If you're looking at at buying investment properties in areas where you can afford to buy, you can buy right now. If on the other hand, you're waiting until you can afford to buy a home in the more expensive, highly desirable areas, you could be waiting a very long time. In a lot of these suburbs, prices are simply out of reach for most people, and it's not uncommon for property values to rise faster than you can realistically save or increase your borrowing capacity. When that happens, the goalposts just keep going further and further away from you. So if your plan is just to work, save, and hope you eventually catch up with property values, you're often fighting a losing battle. At some point, many people need to accept this reality and look at other ways of getting into the market, or else they're going to fall behind financially. With Rentvesting, you're essentially working with the system that you're operating in. You're not working against it. You're getting in early and you're maximizing your time in the market so that compounding can just do its thing. As they say, don't wait to buy property and wait. The second reason why Rentvesting allows for faster wealth creation is because of better cash flow. Generally speaking, renting is cheaper than owning the same property, especially in high-priced areas. So when you rentvest, your living costs are often lower than if you bought in that same area. On top of that, investment properties, if chosen wisely, can be fairly cash flow friendly. Ideally, you're buying properties where the rent covers most of the mortgage and the holding costs, so you're not constantly topping up huge amounts from your own pocket. Plus, many of your investment property expenses are tax deductible, which improves cash flow even more. This is in big contrast to owning your own home, where you're responsible for 100% of the costs, with no rent and no tax deductions to help you. So there's a massive drain on your cash flow. As an investor, you've got the tenant and the taxpayer helping to cover your costs, while your properties increase in value. Over time, rental income should grow to the point where it actually exceeds the property's expenses, which gives you a positive cash flow or passive income. Because of this stronger cash flow position, rentvestors often have more borrowing power, which allows them to borrow more money and use the equity in their investment properties to keep building their portfolio and accelerate their wealth. And the third reason why rentvesting can help give you faster wealth creation is better capital growth. If you're rentvesting the right way, you should be buying your investment properties based on logic and numbers, not feelings. That usually means looking across different parts of the country for the best performing properties in the best performing locations that are within your budget, and then handpicking the ones that are going to perform the way you need them to perform to achieve your goals. Don't just buy whatever is closest or most familiar, which is what most people do, and they get underwhelming results. It's very different to buying your own home, where emotion comes into play. You're not choosing a property because you love the kitchen or the backyard, or settling on the outskirts of the city where capital growth is weaker just because that's all you can afford to live in. And this really matters because due to the power of compounding, even a small difference in annual growth, even 1% per year over a 20 to 30 year period, can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra value. So these aren't small decisions. They can make a huge difference to your wealth in the long run. With all of that said, rentvesting isn't perfect. It has its downsides, and it's not the right choice for everyone. Probably the biggest downside to rentvesting for most people is that you don't own the home you live in, so you can't customize it or renovate it or treat it as truly yours. There's also less security because in theory, a landlord could decide to sell or to not renew your lease, which can be unsettling, especially if you have kids and they have to move schools and things like that. Another downside is capital gains tax. If you eventually sell an investment property to help buy your own home or fund your retirement, you'll have to pay a big whack of capital gains tax on the profit. Whereas any capital gain on your own home in Australia is tax-free. And finally, rentvesting takes patience. You're essentially committing to renting for many years while you build your wealth and work toward being able to afford a home in an area you actually want to live in. And that doesn't suit everyone. It takes a lot of delayed gratification and a long-term mindset, which can be especially tough when you're watching all your friends buy homes around you. All things said and done, I think rentvesting is a really powerful strategy for people who want to build wealth but feel priced out of buying where they actually want to live. It's not a perfect solution, nothing really is. But for a lot of people, especially singles and first home buyers, it can be a smarter and more realistic way to get into the property market. But that'll do me for today, guys. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you considered subscribing to the channel. I put out a new video each and every week all about money, property, and building wealth. And if you want to go a little bit deeper into property investing, you might want to check out this video on your screen right now where I walk through all the simple steps to investing in real estate from scratch. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.